Welcome back. So for today's video, we're going to wrap up my Omega-3 for Beginners series. And we're going to talk today just a little bit about food sources for Omega-3's. So I'm not going to make today real complicated. I'm going to try and keep it kind of simple. But I do want to get across something that is a misconception. This was something that I actually had wrong for a while until I read this handy book and some other things, and just continued to learn. So the misconception I want to address is a lot of people actually believe that you can get omega-3s from grass-fed beef. I used to believe that, but it turns out that, see, if you remember I think it was the first video, I talked about how the type of vegetation that an animal eats determines the parent fat that it's consuming, which in turn affects the fat that it produces, which is what we get. So, and the whole reason omega-3s are a subject, that's not true. One of the reasons omega-3s are a subject, the reason they're considered essential, is because humans don't have the ability to make them on our own. So if we consume the same parent fats that animals did, we won't convert that, at least very effectively. I think we do a little bit, but not to the degree we need. We won't convert those into essential fatty acids, omega-3s or omega-6s. So the only way we're really going to get those is if we consume them. So it turns out that for the most part, and I'll try to make some sense, but cows produce arachidonic acid, which is an omega-6. So even if it's grass-fed, it's still arachidonic acid. Now, it could be possible for some livestock, depending on what they eat. Like I know ranchers who have a lot of alfalfa on their property, and they have deer, and the deer eat the alfalfa. I don't think anyone's ever tested the ratio of the fats in those, but that being like a green leafy vegetation, I could see where that would potentially produce more omega-3s than just eating grass will. Part of this is if we think about like primitive people, or kind of more times when people had to be, when people couldn't afford to be as selective as they are now about what they eat, people probably got a lot of their omega-3s, depending on where they lived, they probably got them from organ meat and from actually consuming the brain, and possibly the marrow of the animal. So, I do believe that in the organs and in the brain, you'll get a higher concentration of omega-3s than you will in the muscle. But I know that most people don't do that, so that's not going to work out. So if you're slaughtering your own livestock, that's an option you can look into. I think back in the day, basically, when people had to, if you think about like a hunter-gatherer type of situation, when a hunter successfully killed an animal and he was feeding his family or his tribe or whatever, it was easier to eat everything that was there than it was to go kill another animal. So in a lot of societies, people probably weren't as selective, at least especially, they might have been at first, but as they consumed the animal, they would probably eventually get to the parts that weren't as desirable until it was time to go hunt again. So, and I think some people who lived on ranches and farms, back in the day, were probably more likely to use up more of the animal. Now, I know at certain points historically, some of those organ meats were considered disgusting, so they would be what was called offal. And sometimes if you read old books, you'll see that word, and that was something that they would use to feed dogs. So either like dogs that were around the farm, or in some war times, offal was just kind of thrown to the dogs to give them something to eat. So the dogs might have gotten better omega-3s than the people. But basically the short version is the important thing I do believe there are some concentrations of omega-3s in grass-fed beef, but it's not a significant amount, so you shouldn't really consider that to be like a source of omega-3s. It is going to have a healthier fat profile than corn-fed beef, but that's not really what we're getting into today. So I might talk about that another time if there is interest. But basically, cattle and other livestock, again, it'll depend on what they eat, but I know like cows, for the most part, beef, it's not a source of omega-3s. So unless you're eating the organs, the organ meat, I should say, and the what some people call the sweetbread. So now, as far as food sources of omega-3s, I put together a list. I kept it short. I didn't put everything that's in there. I tried to keep the list basically to things that are a little more common, that people are more likely to either see in a restaurant or at the store. The bottom line is, if we're looking at trying to pursue optimal health, it's going to be much easier for you to just supplement omega-3s with a good quality fish oil. So I just realized that in the list I put together, in both the lists that I put together, I did not include eggs. Eggs are a good source of DHA if they are organic or free range. So I'll talk about that real quick, because that's something that I know confuses a lot of folks. If you go to the store and you buy the cheapest eggs you can find, typically those eggs come from farms where the chickens are in small cages and they're fed grain, they're indoors all the time, they're cramped, and they basically just produce eggs until they can't produce eggs anymore, and then they're ground up into feed, and then they're disposed of and replaced. If you buy the more expensive eggs, hopefully, you have to do a little bit of research, because this is going to vary kind of depending on where you live. So I'm not going to try to recommend any brands. And you're free to obviously, check out farmers markets and that sort of thing as well. But when chicken are free range, basically they get outside, they're eating at least some bugs. They're probably still being given some feed, but they're going to have a healthier fat profile. So basically, when we're looking at omega-3s to omega-6s, and recapping all that, we need both. They're both essential. Most of us get way too many omega-6s and not enough omega-3s. So that's what this whole thing is about. So your ratio in your kind of typical egg, where the chicken was probably like only fed grain and wasn't outside ever, is estimated to be like 20 to 1 or 15 to 1. Okay, so that's like very high on omega-6s and extremely low on omega-3s. Whereas your free range chicken or your organic egg, sometimes you'll see like they'll feed them flax meal, which is good too, but that'll be more like a 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 3, somewhere in there. So basically just much higher in omega-3s, much lower in omega-6s. Both those things are very important, because omega-3s do a lot of things. I talked about that in a different video, and I could talk about it until you were really tired of watching me, okay? It's a really big subject. Omega-6s do a lot of things too. They're very important. It's just most people, we get too much these days. So anyway, so here's some food sources of omega-3s. You can check those out if you want to. I think that the way that I look at this subject, the way that I look at like health and fitness in general, is we always should try to identify what's optimal for us. Okay, so we should kind of think about what we really want, what's optimal, and then we should think about like what is awful that we don't want. So kind of my long-standing joke is, like this is whatever like best shape you can be in with your whatever your circumstances are. Over here is becoming one with the couch. So, or becoming an extra in the fantastic movie WALL-E. So, if you don't get that, go watch it. And go take some omega-3s and get some exercise. So anyway, where I was going with that is it's we should consider what's optimal. Okay, so how much fish you would have to eat to get an optimal ratio of omega-3s is going to vary a lot from person to person. It's going to vary depending on like your stage in life, how active you are, how big you are, all kinds of things. It's also going to vary depending on how many omega-6s you get in. So for most people, I really feel that supplementing omega-3s is worth it because it's just a lot simpler than trying to get all of them from food. If you want to get some of them from food, that's fine. Actually, it's all fine. It's your life. You do what you want to. I'm just making a free video. So as far as supplementing, though, with omega-3s, if you go that route, which is, I think, wise, what you want to look for, you do not need a prescription for omega-3s, okay? So you don't. Now, I absolutely agree that there are a lot of garbage supplements out there, and omega-3s are one of those things where you absolutely should not, like, don't turn this off and go to the corner store and buy a bottle this big for $5. Don't do it, okay? Especially, the thing is, basically, like, if you buy a really inexpensive product, in the first place, there's a lot of problems with accuracy of labels, so it might not have in it what it's supposed to be in it. That could be a big problem. The other thing is, fish oil can go rancid. If it goes rancid, that is pretty much like eating rotten meat, and it can be real difficult to tell because you're looking at capsules. So maybe I'll just take a picture. I don't think you can really see these, but so I dropped one, so now I have one fish oil capsule. There were two. My dog will probably get that one, but so when they're in these capsules, if that goes rancid, you can't tell. So now an indication actually can be that if you take it and you belch, if you belch and you taste fish, sometimes it's an indication that you're having some digestive issues, so that can be a thing, but it can also mean that the fish oil is rancid. So if you get a good quality fish oil, that should not happen. It might happen like once in a blue moon, but it shouldn't be like the whole bottle type of thing, okay? So, but the main things you want to look at are, one, it should be in a natural triglyceride form. I know that freaks people out because people have done blood work and they hear about the triglycerides and they think they should avoid triglycerides. You can talk to your doctor about that, but basically, like, people need fat, okay? Like, fat's essential fatty acid. So if the fish oil is in a natural triglyceride form, your body can utilize it more effectively. If it is not in a natural triglyceride form, your body's going to have to convert it into that so that it can use it. So there's that. The other thing is it should be pharmaceutical grade. So that does not mean that it has to come from like Pfizer or something like that. It just means that the quality of it needs to be pharmaceutical grade. So if it's pharmaceutical grade and it's in a natural triglyceride form, and look at the dose to make sure that it just has like an adequate dose, which in my view is, most of the time, kind of look at what I have here. Most of the time a dose should have somewhere like around 1 gram of essential fatty acids, and that'll usually be a combination of EPA and DHA. So so there's a lot I could say about that, but those are some of the basics. This is just to kind of, again, this series was supposed to be omega-3s for beginners, not omega-3s for PhD candidates. So it's just to kind of help people get started that maybe don't know anything about the subject. If you end up with more questions than answers, I'm okay with that. Just go ask those questions and find the answers. Let me think. Yeah, I could talk about it I could keep talking about omega-3s, but that's, I've used up all my words. I am done. Go exercise, be healthy. Thanks.